then our other lunch and learns up on our website, which I'm gonna pull up in a second and show you guys. But I thought we could just really quick go around and say where we're all from. I'll start. I'm Shannon. I run the Woodby Island Grown Cooperative Food Hub. Um, and I will shout out to Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Mankey. I work at NABC as project coordinator, and I will pass it on to Evan Lewarch, who's presenting.
Hey everybody, I'm Evan, and I am co-founder of Cutting Vedge Strategies, which is just a small consulting company of two that helps out small food systems organizations and looks at financials, does grant writing, and kind of a little bit of everything else technical. Yeah, I'm formerly based out of Bellingham, but I'm in the middle of a move to Minnesota. So that is why my slides will be a little sparse, and my cat may attack me in the middle of this presentation. And I'll go ahead and pass this on to Jake so we can clear out the kind of NABC team, and then we can call on some participants here.
Jake, we can't hear you. No. It says you're not on mute.
Emily, you'll have to just say a fun fact about Jake, and then we can move on.
Okay, Jake Fowler is our financial wizard, so it's appropriate to have him here at NABC. And he's a dad and an all-around hardworking good guy.
How about Oceana?
Hi. And hello, Jake. We met via email last week. Um, I started a little mini food hub called North Star Grove Mini Food Hub over out here in the Four Corners area outside of between Port Townsend and Port Hadlock. We're focused on BIPOC and queer trans producers.
Thank you. How about Kyle? Welcome.
Hi there. I work with the Washington State Department of Agriculture, and I get to run food banking programs around the state. And I think more and more often, food banks, food pantries, are interested in buying locally, finding aggregators where they can get food. And um, I think as they pop up, that's just more opportunity. And as we try to get the state legislature to allocate more money to local food purchase. It's sort of good to know what's kind of out there. And then I was involved in trying to get like a food hub up and running in North Central Idaho back in grad school. So I'm always slightly curious about the nuts and bolts. Yeah, kind of behind the scenes, I guess. So thanks for letting me sit in.
Cool. I feel like a lot of people within the food system have backgrounds like that, like off the desk type of
Yeah.
stuff. How about Melissa?
Uh, Hello. I run Woodby Island Mushrooms, and I don't know how long I can sit here because I just had back surgery, so we'll see. But I'm curious to learn what you have to offer.
Thanks for coming. How about Jessica?
Hi, I'm Jessica Harper with Ag West Farm Credit, and I work in Spokane, Washington, and focus on our program called Ag Vision, and that encompasses quite a few products and benefits for young, beginning, and small farmers. We work a lot with food hubs and support the Northwest Food Hub Network and programs actually at NABC and also run our new producer grant, which is $15,000 for producers in their first 2 years of business. It's open now. We've had gosh, almost 500 people apply. We've had an incredible response. We cover 7 states though, and it closes at the end of May. So coming right up.
Awesome. Thanks for coming. And Joe. Cheers.
Hi, my name's Joe Seidel, and I am the treasurer for Kitsap Fresh, which is a food hub. We're located in North Kitsap County, and I've been with the board maybe 6 months, and I'm super interested in this workshop, to see if I can pick up some tips to make bookkeeping easier.
Awesome. This is going to be perfect for you. Okay, thanks everyone. It's nice to see you all here. Our Lunch and Learn is organized by the Washington Food Hub Network. So our network supports food hubs in Washington, as well as being part of a national food hub network community of practice with food hub networks from across the country. Our network publishes a collective impacts report each year showing the economic impacts of food hubs in Washington. We facilitate a bi-monthly community of practice meeting, which anyone here would be welcome to join, just for food hubs and other organizations to connect with food hubs and network with each other. And our next meeting is coming up on June 1st, Monday at noon. And then we also put on lunch and learns like this. So those will be on our website as well, to address topics that are relevant to food hubs like finances and financial health. It is not a small effort to build out and maintain these community-driven infrastructure projects. And healthy finances are pretty essential to the longevity of our food hubs if we can make that happen. So we have Evan Lewarch here today. He's gonna dive into the finances of food hubs for us and maybe some decision making. Then we have some quick tips from the NABC bookkeeping team, who works with many food hubs in Washington. And then we'll hopefully have time for questions at the end. Last time we didn't, so the conversation went over into our normal Washington Food Hub Network meeting the next Monday. So we can also debrief then, if y'all are able to come to that. So thanks for being here, and Evan, I'll turn it over to you.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Shannon. Let me click some buttons and then we'll get right into it. That looks
I
good.
wasn't sharing my screen. I thought I was. Sorry.
Uh, we'll get some of those slides up at the end. How about that? Sweet. Okay, well, Shannon called me, I want to say like a month and a half ago, and we schemed a little bit about Food Hub financials. It's definitely on the top of mind for a lot of organizations, especially with like changing funding patterns. And I've personally noticed as a consultant, more folks interested in kind of diving a little bit deeper, into a lot of kind of why questions, like why is something happening, and like how questions, like how do I diagnose or like solve a problem that I've identified. So that kind of uh, is the space we're coming from with this meeting. And there have been two presentations very recently by other food systems organizations covering Food Hub financials. So I think we'll mention those as well and kind of shape this presentation to be complementary and not competitive to those. But the kind of main big picture I want folks to think about, during this webinar and kind of afterwards is, what data are you using for decision making? So what data do you have on hand? You have your financial software, you have spreadsheets, you have receipts. Somewhere along the spectrum, you have information about your business. And then what questions do you have about that data? What has to be done to it to answer those questions? Is it, if you just add some numbers up, are you going to get the answer you want? And then kind of, uh, do you want help with this process at some point? So do I need to hire a bookkeeper to do this? Do I need to hire someone with a little bit more Food Hub specific experience to help get me where I need to go with my questions? Yeah, these are the two webinars that came out recently. I want to say one was like last week, which was Local Food Marketplace, which is a point of sale software company for food hubs, really specializing in food hub like uh, data and sales. And they partnered with Good Agriculture, which is a bookkeeper that specializes in small farms, and they do taxes and bookkeeping. And so that webinar had a nice little overview of some basic chart of account stuff and how to integrate local food marketplace or LFM with your QuickBooks. And then a couple weeks ago, the Oregon Food Hub Network had a kind of recap of their 2025 financial planning projects. So they hired a CFO to come in and help for food hubs kind of review their finances and make some strategic decisions. And then the hour presentation there was the four food hubs talking and kind of chatting with other food systems organizations about what they learned, what they do different next time, and kind of big picture takeaways from that process. And so with those kind of two like things framing, we have a CFO level engagement, which is you want to have a lot of data and like ducks in a row before you engage was one of the kind of feedbacks uh, from that webinar. And then you also have like just using your software better or setting up accounts. So we're going to be kind of trying to aim this webinar at a middle ground of I've done a little bit of basic setup. I've worked with a bookkeeper at some point, or I've watched AgWest's lovely webinars about how to look at my financials. And now I'm ready for the next step to think about it in terms of like a food hub operator space. So that's where we're going. And then uh, one of the big takeaways from the Oregon Food Hub Network one was, I wish I had a little more direction with my questions. So like you go and work with a consultant or a professional, and they're expensive and it's hourly, and like the process starts to take off before you even realize like what question did I want to answer and what would it do for me. So some recent questions I've worked with food hubs on are where should I focus my attention to best benefit the food hub financially? Like uh, where should I spend an hour of my time? Is it chasing after these like small figure things because they're like leaking revenue? Should I go and just push sales? Will sales just fix my problems? In a lot of cases, that actually is the case, but for different reasons. Uh, a lot of hubs have multiple enterprises. So, like, how do you separate out profitability between a CSA program and your wholesale operation? And the secret is it does live in the books, but you might not have it separated in your chart of accounts. So, finding a way to use your data to pull that data apart and estimate, oh, like I was break even, but I was profitable 20K on this one and lost 20K on this one. How do I not lose 20K so I can make more money? A lot of folks are trying to hire staff or give themselves a raise or give their staff a raise. And so then how much can I afford is a really big question, especially in competitive markets where you really need like one key staff member to hold your hub together during kind of turbulent times, knowing that you can pay them that extra, 5% or whatever it is. You gotta start with your books and your kind of data to answer that question. And then just a couple more things that like really popped out in some of the other webinars were can I afford to pay myself as an owner? So new food hubs startups are often a farm, a multi-farm CSA, and then a central owner. and then they don't pay themselves, and it's very difficult to like build that cost into your operation when you've been running for a couple years without paying that cost. Um, and then just some general understanding about like, what the difference between a profit and loss statement and a balance sheet, and kind of my true financial position as a food hub, are, and how to answer those questions. And if anyone has like a burning question, we can interrupt. Uh, it'll be a lot more interesting than these slides, which are just text because I was moving. But I'm also leaving some space at the end. And I'd love to get into some specifics without maybe totally derailing, because I think specific questions will really help you frame the kind of help that you want, and also help kind of spark the conversation about like, what should I be asking next? Okay, so as far as decision making, financially, there's kind of three big financial statements. You'll need these to work with a lender if you're, and not in the space where you think you can ask for money. It's still really good to have these on hand. The profit and loss in particular is how you like pay taxes. So you want to have some variation of these documents. But the kind of the big picture three documents. You have the balance sheet, which is effectively like what you have, what assets and liabilities, and it's a snapshot at a given point in time. So say you went out of business today and sold everything and paid off all your creditors, what would be left? Um, Profit and loss is more of kind of a metric of your profitability in any given month or year. You can do it on a bunch of different kind of timelines, but monthly is the standard. And then obviously quarterly is important for a lot of hubs because they pay quarterly taxes, and so your P&L should help just click a couple buttons if your finances are tight and you can get those answers. Sometimes there's a little bit of extra stuff for produce sales and tax exemption and all that kind of stuff. And then cash flow budget. So just having like a knowledge of, my finances are changing at a certain rate. I've made some expense, like I've made some purchases that might go to my balance sheet. I might not see that in my profit and loss. But all of a sudden I'm short on, like on cash. Like how much cash do you need at any given time to support your operations? And these three all kind of interact with each other, but they also have blind spots that the other one kind of fills. So just uh, having a comfortability with these three documents, it will allow you to work with lenders, consultants. Like a lot of folks at a glance can then look at these three documents and tell you like a lot about your business, without you having to then, spend more time explaining it to them. Just doing a quick time check. Okay. It's great that we have someone from Ag West here, because I have taken Ag West's webinars, and I found them really helpful. The ones on their website are a little more focused on small farms than food hubs, but they are really great. Like just get you in the door. It's an hour each for kind of their big three, and all three of those were covered on this website. And so here's the link for that. Yeah, spend 3 hours, sip a tea, a coffee, whatever, on a weekend when you're not stressed about work. Um, I would highly recommend that's just the first step. And then you can talk to a bookkeeper and kind of go from there if you're just setting it. And also for board literacy, I know I've heard from a bunch of folks like my board doesn't understand my financial documents. Like just get them to watch this as part of their onboarding process, and you can go from there. It's a really great like let's just start at a certain starting point here. Okay. I do see there's a question. Shannon, could you read that out if it feels relevant right now?
I will. That was a comment from Emily that she loves the AgWest financials videos as well.
Awesome. Sweet. Well, they're a little more eloquent than me, and their team is great. So I'm just going to flash a slide, briefly touch on, and move on to kind of working with food hubs because we are a little bit short on time. Um, but yeah, the balance sheet, if you went out of business today, your assets minus your liabilities is going to equal your equity. It's kind of a little math problem. Um, and the main things to think about with this document are it should show a snapshot of what your cash is and also like what your kind of big picture like purchases like infrastructure and vehicles and just kind of like big picture things about your business that aren't necessarily changing on a given frequency. But then you do have short-term assets and liabilities that are changing and they're interacting with your P&L on a pretty regular basis. Um, and so just understanding that certain items when you buy them will appear on your balance sheet and not on your P&L is just important for like thinking through what your true profitability is at any given time. And I've seen this a couple of different ways with food hubs recently, specifically on inventory management. So like creation of a value added product, and thinking through like, oh, like I actually have like a lot of inventory sitting there. It's not affecting my P&L necessarily because I've like created value, but it's sitting as an asset waiting to be sold and turned into money. And I've invested money into it, which makes my like bank account low. So it lives on the balance sheet when your balance sheet is tight, but sometimes it's not tight. And so just knowing where to look. Is yeah, that's just come up a couple of times with food hubs recently. Um, and also just thinking through like loans and debt, your interest appears in your P&L, but not your principal. So when you're paying off a loan, you're working down your liability, the long-term loan liability, but you're also like reducing, your short-term cash to pay that down. So these things, that's how they kind of connect. Um, your profit and loss is it's a report that any like financial software can spit out. And what it does is it takes a bunch of line items called your chart of accounts, which talk about your income and your expenses, and really like break it down into a nitty-gritty format. So you can like in an accounting software, you can click a button and kind of see like what all of your subscription expenses or what all of your revenue is coming from. You can see the individual transactions. And it is a wealth of knowledge when it's properly maintained. Um, you probably should be doing this on a monthly basis. Most of that software is going to arbitrarily do that for you, but you can do it quarterly or annually. And I personally like to do monthly broken out and then summed up to an annual basis afterwards. So you can kind of get nice average of a bunch of items there. The kind of main thing with the P&L specifically is thinking about your accounting basis. So there's two forms. There's cash basis where you only track income and expenses when they hit your bank account. So like you sell produce and that day you get cash and it's in your bank. Cash basis works great for farmers and for that in particular. Food hubs, as kind of a middleman, oftentimes have terms with both their producers and their customers, which are called accounts receivable and accounts payable. And so a lot of food hubs are living in either a total accrual basis, which means you're only tracking expenses, or sorry, you're tracking expenses when they're incurred, but not when they're paid. So you have a time frame before that cash hits your bank account. Um, or leaves it. Um, and this particular thing, a lot of hubs are kind of living in a semi-cash basis because they're looking at their bank account, and they know they sold stuff, but they also aren't necessarily tracking AR or AP super tight. So like as a consultant that works with folks, trying to get them uh, closer to accrual basis. Is really helpful for actually understanding if a given month was profitable or not. And some of your point of sale software will actually like arbitrarily track an accrual basis. And then the real distinction is going back and looking at your bank account and saying, did that actually hit? And like, what was the offset? Um, so yeah, just quick little troubleshooting things there. And then cash flow budget. So
Evan, really
yeah.
quick before we move on to the next slide. Question about what AR and AP are.
Oh,
So
totally.
accounts receivable and accounts payable.
Yeah. Okay, so accounts receivable is anything that you've sold but haven't been paid for yet. So if you're working with, say, like a grocery store or a restaurant, they'll have terms with you. Sometimes it'll be net 15, so 15 days from your invoice. Sometimes it's net 30. With some institutional buyers, it's even longer, net 45 or net 60. And that just means that that's how many days from when you send the invoice you actually get paid. So that's accounts receivable. Accounts payable is bills. So say like your electric bill or whatever, or your credit card statement, it'll arrive on the first, and then you have to pay it by the 25th or the 30th. So that's an accounts payable. It's a debt that you owe, but you don't owe it immediately. And so those two items will be sitting there kind of like hanging over your bank account. So you're going to spot check your bank account. You're going to say, I have $10,000 in my bank account. I'm feeling good. And then your accounts receivable might be like $5,000, but you also might have, $8,000 of accounts payable. So depending on the timing of when those hit, it really will drastically affect your cash flow. Um, and just like a little bit of an aside too, a lot of food hubs try to build their systems so that their accounts payable is a couple of weeks longer than their accounts receivable. That just builds cash into the system, but it really depends on what your producer base can handle. So the biggest expense for food hubs is the cost of goods. So paying farmers. And so your farmers are going to want to get paid sooner than 30 days generally, but some food hubs do operate at that level. Your customers can pay on a much shorter notice. It really depends. I mean, direct to consumer food hubs like CSA programs pay in advance or like at point of sale. So that's like net zero. You're getting the money immediately, and then you have accounts payable to your producers at some frequency. But yeah, those are the two big ones, and uh, those are the things that are interacting with your cache. Yeah, Oceana, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make sure I understood you because you just made a really important point for someone like me who's new at this.
Mhm.
You just said that it's better to have a 2 week lag between your accounts, um, the money that you're going to receive from the buyer
Mhm.
versus the money you have to pay out to the producers.
Yeah.
So, what I heard you say was that buyers, since I'm working with institutional buyers, so buyers
Mhm.
can usually pay in or net zero or net 15 even. And
I-
then that gives you cash to pay your producers. Is that how you were saying that?
Yeah, and it really depends on the customer type. So, like school districts, sometimes they can pay cash at the loading dock, and other times they have to go through their whole finance department. It can take 30 plus days to get you a check in the mail. Um, Meanwhile, if you're like at a farmer's market or like selling like on a much shorter like time frame, like people are charging their credit cards and paying immediately, then you're building that offset immediately. And that actually was part of, let's see, the Oregon Food Hub Network had another webinar with Kitchen Sink Strategies, which does institutional sales for food hubs. And in that webinar, they talk about kind of the payment terms for institutional customers, where there is this great kind of offset of some customers are paying immediately and others are paying at 60 days, where you have to float, depending on the scale of your food hub, tens of thousands of dollars that you're going to pay your producers before you can actually get paid. So, um, yeah, to your point, it is very variable. The ideal scenario, though, is you get paid first, have a little bit of wiggle room, and then pay your producers if they can handle that. Any other questions? Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem. So, as far as the cash flow budget, it is very similar to a P&L. You can even take your P&L and depending on your accounting basis, just put your starting cash amount at the beginning of the month, and then kind of run all of the profit and loss off of that to see if you're gonna dip into zero cash at some point throughout the month or throughout the year. Um, but there's a handy little template that AgWest has just to think about it, like when bills are hitting and when money is hitting coming in. Um, and you want to build a little bit of wiggle room too, so that you like when you have auto pay things or when someone has your ACH information, it can just charge you and you see like, oh yeah, like it's $300 more than I expected. Like you want to build a little bit of a buffer in your bank account so that you're not, overdrawing or basically like bouncing checks. So that's what this document will help you do. Um, and it's just kind of a little process of going through. It's part of the budget process, really. It's just seeing how all your expenses kind of fall throughout the month. This might be something that a bookkeeper could also help you with, is knowing when things hit within the month. So even though it's living in this kind of aggregated monthly space, knowing that, oh, this always hits at the beginning of the month and that hits at the end. So they're not going to interact with each other on like a cash flow basis. Um, and you don't need to buffer for both at the same time. Let's see here. Okay, so we've talked through those big three documents, in a quick format. The question I get the most from food hubs is, well, what should my numbers be? Um, and the answer is it depends, which is it sucks to hear that answer. But it depends mainly on a couple of different things. One is the type of like enterprise you're operating. If you're doing a mixture of things, you don't have to achieve the perfect idealized like wholesale food hub if you're also doing general freight and also doing CSAs. Um, and so there's a lot of information out there on like ways to track your data and also like historical benchmarks for certain food hubs. Not always relevant in 2026, but the process is useful. So I always send folks, if they have the time to read a couple of studies. Um, the first one, I think it was based in 2012 or maybe even earlier. I think it's maybe 2012 was when it was published, but it was off of like some 2010 data from Food Hubs, which, 16 years later, not all of that's going to be relevant because the food system has changed quite a bit in that time. But they go through a whole bunch of like benchmarks for things like what should my labor cost be? What should my like a value of sales per FTE in labor be? And they compared some food hubs and food hub profitability. And the thing that I really liked about it was they talk about discussing all of your expenses in terms of your like as a percent of your sales so that you can see like, okay, at the top, I'm going to have this much income and this cost is 4% of my sales. And then you ask the question, if I increase sales, is it going to stay 4%? Is it going to go up or down? Am I efficient in that particular category? So labor is the one that everyone looks at. You also look at logistics, so like the cost of operating a truck in a given area. Um, and then like other items like overhead where you have facility rent that you can't change, but you're saying how much in sales do I need to make to afford the rent that I have and the labor, and maybe I want a GM too. And you kind of work backwards from your margin or you adjust your margin and assume the same sales. So it's kind of that like which variable am I going to control or which variables am I going to control and try to find a solution that's just numbers based. Um, so they're great, worth a read. If I think it's still up, but if you can't find it, I have a PDF saved, so I can send it to you. USDA also did a running a food hub series, and it was over the course of like 4 years. I think they whipped one of these out every year or two. Um, and specifically, volume three has some pro formas for direct to consumer food hubs. like subscription box programs, that kind of thing, and also for wholesale food hubs. The data is not relevant for Pacific Northwest, like labor costs, but how they built the model is still relevant. You'll just take out the like 750 an hour they put in for drastically affect the profitability of your operation, which is what we're all kind of going through right now. And then actually part four is a little depressing, but also useful because they talk about how different food hubs like failed or closed, or kind of the takeaways from operators after a food hub had closed business. And just, spoilers, the big one was having a business plan in place, or sorry, not having a business plan in place, and not tracking your financials were kind of like some of the top ones. So, so by showing up today, you've already mitigated at least one of those things. Um, and then the National Food Hub survey comes out every 2 years or so. So the most recent one came out in December, and it's just useful for kind of seeing like how different. It's an aggregation of a bunch of food hub responses. So if you're looking at market channels or debt ratios, it's not as detailed as I would like as someone who likes big data. But you can contact their folks and like maybe get like some like more detail, or like try to track down some of these other hubs and get like a one-on-one meeting with them if you're really interested in a specific thing. Um, so we have some ways of getting benchmarks. We have the three documents that we need to look at. What if those three documents don't immediately give me the answer that I need as an operator? So it might be those three documents might be controlled by your bookkeeper, and you're a food hub manager that is just trying to look at labor costs, whatever else. So I recommend, if you're a little bit data savvy, to take your P&L and sort it the way that you want to see. So that P&L is going to be sorted for an accountant to do taxes. There's going to be certain like assumptions about like what is good or bad for a business. Um, but food hubs are a low margin business, low profitability. And a couple key like decisions can really affect what your bottom line profitability is. Like 1% margin might be the difference between being in business and being out of business for a food hub. Um, so I work with folks a lot of times just taking their raw P&L and sticking into an Excel spreadsheet and just sorting it the way that highlights how their operations run. You can do this in QuickBooks. You can even separate out different enterprises. You have to pay a little extra to get the class feature where you can see, say, a CSA and a wholesale enterprise within one food hub, broken out side by side and then added together in columns. Um, they have a tag system that can do some of this work, or you can print out like a report from QuickBooks to do that. But you do have to estimate some things on how certain things are divided between those enterprises if you're separating out enterprises. Um, Yeah, and so this is just another tool. You take your P&L and you get a like you make sure you have a static copy saved somewhere, and then you play around with it. So that's actually a lot of what I do is just breaking out people's P&L and trying to like sort with them and try to understand what is sitting between these line items, and how they can make decisions with that data. So you'll see something like this, where your P&L will just have a line item, and it might have like a parent line item, and then you have monthly totals, and then an annual total. And then I add like a little thing. I had to anonymize some data here, so you see all the reference that are no longer working. But we just run everything as a percentage of sales. Um, and so you can see what your gross profit is. The inverse of that number is going to be what your margin is, or your combined margin for a bunch of different sales channels, based off of what your cost of goods are for those markets. And then we talk about scalable sales, so or scalable expenses. So things that we think are going to be um, increasing at the same rate. So they'll be the same percentage um, for a given amount of sales. So for every $1,000 of sales, you're going to have the same bank charges, theoretically the same amount of fuel, depending on your logistical efficiency, stuff like that. And then you also break out overhead as a different line item. So stuff like rent, if you're leasing a vehicle, just like administrative overhead. So like having salaried staff that are going to have a fixed salary throughout the year. And overhead is kind of the big enemy of food hubs. You start off small and you're lean because you're not paying really like much overhead. You're like sticking your operation in a like a member farms space so you don't pay rent, all that kind of stuff. And then the second you start to have like a dedicated staff and dedicated space, there's this huge cost that isn't paid for by your small sales. And so it's a race against your line of credit and loans to get enough sales to offset that overhead in a meaningful way. And so just having your P&L broken out in a clean chart of accounts helps you see, what percentages these things are impacting your bottom line. And you can break this out. You can make another little tab and have like this enterprise has 0% of this and 100% of this, or this enterprise has 35% of cross-dock fees or something like that. So you can customize this in a way that you can't necessarily do in QuickBooks uh, quickly. You can still do it, but you're going to have to be like assigning costs as they come in to these things. So if what you just need is a quick look without setting up a system to consistently look at this stuff, that's kind of where this spreadsheet business kind of shines. And then I like to take this, which is noisy and kind of, there's a lot of numbers, especially when it's filled in. So I clean it up a little bit and just give an annual report with a ratio. So we look at like just kind of the annual totals, like how much was, grocery store sales as a percentage of total sales, and then like kind of working our way down, like how much were different expense line items as percent of total sales. So following that kind of counting values format, and making it clean and color coded and just very visible way of kind of just visualizing your data. And so then we look at the key levers of your business. So like ways to actually like stay profitable and understand kind of your uh, how is your operation working. So the fix for a lot of food hubs is, sell $150,000 more in produce, but that's not something you can just turn on or off, right? You're going to be investing in your cost of sales. You're going to hire a salesperson or do some marketing work. You might adjust your margin by 1 or 2% so that you have 1 or 2% at the bottom. And to offset all of these costs. And you might try to renegotiate a lease or move spaces to reduce your overhead, or write a grant. There's different models of Food Hub, like profit and nonprofit. Um, so you qualify for different things, and some food systems, folks just sit in this space and say, you know what, I'm a community food access entity. I need to be subsidized to exist, but here's all the value I bring to the community. And so I need to fundraise for X amount. And it's a percentage of my total sales. And that's how I scale, or that's how I sit comfortably in this space and just continue to operate doing the great work that I do. And so you take those levers and you say, can I figure all of these out via those now 4 reports, right? Um, and you'll find oftentimes that you still need to fill in the gaps. So payroll, depending on how you're um, processing it, like if you're doing it through QuickBooks, if you're doing it through some other payroll provider like Gusto or something like that, it'll spit out different information. So as an operator, you might want to have some sort of timesheet tracker that you can add extra detail to. So like say like these are aggregation hours. These are staff that are moving boxes. These are staff that are doing delivery shifts. Uh, if you have like a GM who drives the trucks sometimes, half of their labor should live under overhead because they're administrating and managing the business, and half of it should live under like the cost of sales because they're delivering goods. Um, and that helps you understand where you're spending your money and like whether it would scale if you had increased sales. Like, would you just hire a driver? You wouldn't hire another manager at that point. And so then your overhead's not going to go up, but your cost of sales is going to stay the same because you're going to increase sales at the same rate that you're increasing this delivery driver position. Um, so yeah, payroll details. There's a whole bunch of spreadsheets you can do for logistical and routing efficiency. And if folks are interested in those, like that's probably an entire like lunch and learn topic on its own. But please reach out about any of these, and it's free to chat with me and ask about like different things like this. I helped develop some of the KPIs for the Puget Sound Food Hub, and some of that was based off of Western Montana Growers Co-op's like logistics and routing calculator, and it's a thing of beauty. They like work it out to like how much it costs to touch one box and get that one box to its end destination. Um, but from a P&L standpoint, you just see it's like, oh, 5% is logistics costs or whatever. But like going all the way back, you can calculate that without touching QuickBooks, just based off of what your driver costs, fuel cost, and a couple other things are. So as an operator, it's helpful to have these like independent checks to kind of fill in the data later. Um, yeah, line item expenses, just going through QuickBooks and seeing like how are these different things like falling onto my books and understanding like, oh, my subscription went up by 20 bucks because I didn't do the annual payment or whatever. Those are like slow day tasks that can save you a couple $100 at the end of the day. But it's all worthwhile. And so just understanding like how your data is presented in QuickBooks and who is making decisions off of it is just that's the most important thing. And then your point of sale software, so like local food marketplace, LFM, Farmigo. That's where you have this more detailed, granular sales data. So if you're focused on a given market channel or like the performance of a certain margin with a certain customer type, or if you have weird margins that change based off of like the product and the customer, um, you probably want to like be digging into that software rather than your P&L. It's just going to tell you what your cost of goods is, and it's you'll have all that information in your point of sale software. Um, so you have complementary reports you can once you've identified a problem, said like my margin isn't performing, like can we look at our sales and see like, oh, we didn't categorize beef appropriately and we've been losing money every hamburger we sold for the last 5 years or whatever. That stuff lives in the point of sale, but you identify it uh, based off your P&L, seeing like, oh, like this number feels a little bit high or a little bit low. Let's go further. Let's dive deeper into our information that we have. Okay. We have burnt almost all of our time, but we have, I think Shannon has to get the five bookkeeper tips, which super helpful for like you as an operator working with a bookkeeper to get to a point where you can ask these questions. So I'll hand it over to her and then we can just shoot general questions. And I do also have my contact info. If you want to chat food systems any old time, I am available and excited to work with you.
Yes, thanks, Evan. I'm gonna put up this bookkeeping 5 ways to help your bookkeeper that our NABC bookkeeper put together. But while I'm doing that, if you all have any questions for Evan, like shout him out. I'm just trying to make it bigger. A lot of these go with what Evan's already said of um, kind of getting set up with your accounts, label, scan, and file receipts. I feel like I'm bad at that one. Ah! Um, Communicating questions, making sure your bookkeeper has access to all the financial accounts they need to, and reviewing your P&L. So that's important as something that needs to be able to be done by your organization or someone in it. Um, Evan, like, what is your advice for sourcing someone for the P&L? Or I guess you can watch the Ag West uh, videos as well.
Yeah, I think the main recommendation from a lot of these webinars was find a bookkeeper and they will help you. And so that's what I'd recommend. But you should try watching that Ag West video. Like literally, it's an hour, and it's so much more valuable than almost anything else. It's just spending that hour to watch it and get some questions, and then you can start looking at what data do you have and how you would put it into a P&L format if you don't already have a software that is doing that. So if you're just starting up and have zero like historical data and haven't set up your chart of accounts, definitely watch that video and then watch the other two videos and then go to a bookkeeper and also ask them if you can afford them. Bookkeepers are good at telling you how much it costs to do different things. And so that would be my recommendation is to say like how much is it going to cost to do this thing? When you're just starting out, you will not be complex. If you're coming at it 10 years in and bringing on a bookkeeper, it's a lot more complex. But um, bookkeepers are great and they will help you out. Do you have any other questions from the group that are helpful? A specific question that you might have about your finances. We only have a couple of minutes, but we can walk through a process of figuring that out live. It might be helpful. If not, yeah, I'm here. You have my email. And Jessica asked in the chat too if we could send out kind of links to all those resources. So I'll send those along to Emily, and then she can kind of send those off to all relevant folks that signed up for this webinar. And you can also reach out to me directly and I'll send you links to whatever I'm thinking about.
I think everyone is good. Thank you all for coming. Evan, thank you so much. Um, this is super helpful.
Awesome. Well, it's a pleasure. And yeah, always excited to talk food systems with folks.
And I just want to shout out too to everyone left. If any producers are on the call or any hubs who work directly with producers, we have another workshop coming up that will help producers who have farm stands on site get signed up to take EBT and WIC. All that information is shared in the same place the information for this Lunch and Learn was. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about that. Thanks.